hours of like going on for 24 hours.
Really?
3 days in a row.
Wow. They close old San Juan just for that. Yeah. Her parents have died, and so all of her siblings have moved to the United States. So she has no living family in Puerto Rico anymore.
Okay.
So we haven't been in a decade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I hate that.
Yeah.
We loved traveling there, but yeah. All right, we are on principle number 6. All right, so before we pick up here, thanks everybody for hanging with me. I know I am impressed with you guys doing this for 3 hours on whatever day this is, Wednesday.
Yep.
But ownership, governance position, board holism, ends policies, and board means policies. All right, we're on 6, so we're on the second half where we can see we're lining up the runway and getting ready to land. But let's do number 6. I think Lewis, you are up for number 6. Read that for us and tell us what it says.
6, executive limitation policies. The board makes decisions with respect to the staff, means decisions and actions only in a prescriptive way in order simultaneously to avoid prescribing means and B, to put off limit those means that will be unacceptable even if they work. Policy documents contain solely these decisions are categorized as executive limitations in the policy governance terminology, but can be called by whatever name a board chooses as long as the content is strictly preserved.
Yeah. So executive limitations, management limitations, boundaries, whatever you call them, you can call them whatever you want, but the concept is what is so important. So tell us what you just read, Luis.
I mean, well, for me, being in the military, so you got these policies, so if she do something, I gotta follow the policy. I can't come back with my own policy.
Yeah.
Just say something else. At the end of the day, it's black and white, so I have to use what I have.
That's right.
To do what I do.
Very good. Very good. What's really interesting about executive limitations is it's formulated in negative language. The commissioner shall not. Okay? There's a reason for that. That always strikes people as weird. Why are these things that you cannot do this and cannot do this? Okay, so that's being proscriptive instead of prescriptive. All right, let's talk about how we turn those negatives into positives. First of all, look at the screen behind me. The board should control how the head of school, the commissioner operates. So these are staff meetings, but only through predefined limits or limitations. So these executive limitations lay out the boundaries of unacceptable behavior or activity. And they are stated negatively, as we just talked about. Within these predefined policies, the commissioner is free to use his or her own judgment within the limits of law, prudence, and ethics. So even though you may not say, don't do anything that's illegal, that's implied. Mm-hmm. Pursue your ends within these boundaries that are ethical, moral, legal, and appropriate, right? Don't do something stupid, right? Don't do something stupid.
No stupid.
Head of school, don't do something stupid. Okay, so what about turning negatives into positives? Let's think about this. So the commissioner feels empowered within these areas. What areas are we talking about? Okay, so the little square represents, here's what you can do. If you have policies that says, do this, that's his area of being empowered, as opposed to the idea of stop until we say go. He can only operate right here instead of out here. And you'll see how that flushes out on the other side. So here, the other way to do it is this way. Activities that are limited by the board, your executive limitations. These are the areas we're saying do not do that, which then allows all of this empowerment and freedom to accomplish the ends within that, right? Mm-hmm. So here's an illustration. My child is on the tricycle, learning how to ride the bike in the sidewalk. And what I say to my child is, do not go in the street. Mm-hmm. So, all right, so that makes sense, right? Because the purpose, I don't want my child to get run over. I want good things to happen to him and avoid bad things, right? But then if my kid is a commissioner or a head of school or something, does he have to ask, can I ride on the sidewalk? You'd have to ask, right?
You don't have to.
No, he doesn't have to.
Okay.
In the right
Because
way.
it's not the street.
Right? Okay, so you get the idea, right? Mm-hmm. So that's the same kind of a thing. We're saying, hey, here's your world, this is the area you stay off of, all right?
You can say don't spend more than $50,000, so.
You can say that,
Anything between this and 49,000, whatever he's doing.
yeah, absolutely. Do you have that as a limitation? Yeah. Limitation I have is that I can't spend more than $50,000 without going through a formal comparison to make sure. So if I've got a $50,000 or more expensive process, I have to get multiple quotes to make sure I'm getting the best value, the best deal, right? That's my limitation. I can spend more than $50,000. I can't spend more than we take in. The other thing is I have to have the equivalent of 2 months of operating expense in reserve. Okay, that's another limitation, right? It's a beautiful thing. All right, so this turns negatives into positive. All right, let's just look real quick at an executive limitation. So we're all on the same policy page. Okay, I'm on policy 2.3, financial conditions and activities. So, it says this, with respect to financial conditions and activities, the commissioner will not cause or allow the development of fiscal jeopardy or material deviation of actual expenditures off the board, from the board ends priorities. So, you can't spend, commissioner, you can't spend money that aren't related to pursuing the ends.
Correct.
Okay? The commissioner will not expend more funds than received in the fiscal year. I have the same one. You have A and B subpoints there. 2, the commissioner will not use board designated long-term reserves or restricted funds. So I'm assuming there are clear funds that are restricted and reserved for board designation. 3, the commissioner will not borrow funds, exception of credit cards used for normal business purposes and paid in full each month. I have a similar limitation. I cannot engage in financing, engage in a loan without board approval. 4, the commission will not acquire, encumber, lease, or dispose of real estate. Have the same limitation. We just 3 years ago bought a corner piece of property that now sits did you notice the what's the name of the coffee shop that's there?
Yeah.
You saw it. Summer Moon, thank you, and Tzatziki's, there's another one in there. So we bought that, it was for sale for $1 million. We asked them, would you come down to 600, and they did, so we bought that thing. And then it took us a couple of years, but we found a lease partner who developed that coffee shop. We entered into a 30-year lease, ground lease with him. So he developed it at his expense, and now we have 30 years of revenue coming from that piece of property. Amazing. And so all that's gonna go, but I couldn't purchase that or even encumber that property without board approval. Got board approval, everybody's on board, it was great. But the great thing about that, and this is just a side story, is this particular lease partner, we had many people interested in leasing that from us and building something there.
Wow.
Many, because it's on 2 state roads,
Oh,
14.
absolutely, yeah.
And,
Great area.
and so Popeyes wanted to go there, and we were kind of working with Popeyes. I'm like, no, we don't want Popeyes in the corner of our property. This guy came along and gave an LOI and said, hey, I want to build this, build my capital, of course, and then after 30 years, I'll donate the whole enterprise back to you, the new building that's there, and the business itself, and it's like, wow, how do we? That's a perfect
no-brainer.
Yeah, right? So, and then all that revenue is going into a board restricted endowment fund. So it's a good thing. All right, so turning negatives into positives. There we go. So the idea is, it's not stop until we say go. What you're saying is go unless we said stop through the executive limitations. All right, questions, comments, thoughts about executive limitations? Why don't you speak to them? How do the executive limitations work for you?
I think it's clear, and I take it the way it is supposed to be, which is not negative, but stay within these boundaries.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, stay
Absolutely.
within the boundaries.
You find them empowering?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know where the white lines are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. As head of school, I can just say that as well. It's just a beautiful thing. All right, let's go to the next one. This is policy sizes. I think you're up, Jimmy.
Sue, take that. Let me see if I can find my reader so I
I just took a bite of something, hold on. The board's decisions in ends, governance process, board management delegation, and executive limitations are made beginning at the broadest, most inclusive level and if necessary, continuing into more detailed levels that narrow the interpretive range of higher levels, proceeding one articulated level at a time. The documents are exhaustive, replacing or obviating board expression of mission, vision, and philosophy. It keeps going, okay. Values, strategy, and budget. They are called policies in the terminology of the policy governance model, but can be called by whatever name the board chooses as long as their concept is strictly preserved.
Okay, we're talking about policy sizes. I don't know when Phil did your initial training, but sometimes he brought along those little Russian dolls that there's a big one, you open it up, there's a smaller one inside, you open that up, the smaller one, you go down. That's an exact, perfect analogy of policy sizes. You might think, well, why is that important? Because it's your voice. You want to speak in terms of what's the main thing, the most important thing. Here on this illustration behind me, we have those bowls, those nesting bowls that sit in. My wife has mixing bowls just like that, and I love because they're functional, they stack up, they only take that space right there. But it's a powerful thing because when you speak and use your voice to communicate by policy, you're doing it what's most important. So I'm back on management limitation 2.3. It's a beautiful illustration of policy sizes. The first one is that first statement that says, with respect to financial condition activities, the commissioner will not cause or allow the development of fiscal jeopardy or material deviation of actual expenditures from the board's ends priorities. Boom, that's a big deal, right? And then there are 5 kind of subpoints under that are those smaller issues, and then there's even an A and B under number 1. That's an exact illustration of policy sizes, and it all emanates from that first statement, the big idea, right?
Correct.
That's why policy sizes are important, and when you communicate, you got to decide, is this a big issue, or is this a sub-issue under one of other policy statements that we already have? Okay, policy sizes. Questions, comments, thoughts? All right. We're gonna go to number 8 then. And who's up? Is that you?
I'll see if I can read this. I couldn't
Right.
find it. It must be in my truck. If the board chooses to delegate to management through chief executive officer, it honors the exclusive authority and accountability of that role as the sole connector between governance and management. In the event the board never delegates the same authority or responsibility to more than one point.
So there's several things there. Tell us what you just read.
I don't know. I was focusing on reading the dang thing.
All right.
I know
So you
that.
read yourself and then tell me, what is that saying?
Well,
Pretty
they're
much
delegating the management to me,
And we're trusting that you communicate.
and have the trust that I keep using staying inside the white lines, but
That's right.
it's such an easy analogy that it works.
Okay. I'm going to say there are 3 really important words that are all 3 separate concepts in there.
Yep.
What are they? 3 really important things that this principle says.
Delegate,
Okay, that's 1.
Authority and accountability.
There you go. There's 2. Authority. You're giving your commissioner the authority to do all operations, but you're also not just giving him authority, you're giving him accountability.
Right.
How do you hold him accountable? We're going to talk about that here in a little bit. Monitoring reports, your executive limitations, but how do you know he's staying within those? Okay, we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. And then the other concept there, and I'm going to circle delegation too, because this is really what we're talking about. Within delegation, there's the authority, then accountability, but sole connector.
Connector, yeah.
All right, so let me just tell you, and you have 1 commissioner, and that's great. My board always says this, we have 1 employee, and it's Dr. Barthel, right? Dr. Barthel hires all these other people, the administrative staff, the faculty, the support staff, and everything, to help him pursue those ends, right? To pursue the ends of Southside Christian School. So this board has 1 employee, and it's your commissioner. It's the sole connector. Let me tell you a real life story, and it's in my Christian school world again. I've been in the Christian school for 41 years. I worked for ACSI, the Association of Christian Schools International, for 8 years before coming back into head of school here at Southside Christian. But the history of ACSI was there were these 2 associations that formed in the 60s and 70s when Christian schools were just popping up, and one's called the Western Association of Christian Schools, the other's called Mid-America something, I forget. And each of them had an executive director. They called him executive director. And so as Christian schools just started growing in the 70s and increasing exponentially, these two associations came together and they decided to form one association called ACSI. And they formed a board, they combined the two boards into one board. But they made a really huge blunder. They decided to honor both these guys and have two co-presidents of ACSI. Guess what happened?
Didn't work.
It didn't work. And the board had to choose between one of them. And they chose the one guy. And the other guy was wounded and hurt by that, left the association, and they're still ill will 40 years later.
Right.
And it's a sad story. And these are people who are Christ followers who should know better and behave better. But there was a conflict that was created. And then, of course, there were people who were committed to this guy and other people committed to this guy. When they made a decision for this guy, some of these other people, well, then we're out of here. Right? You can't have a two-headed beast. You have to have one employee, right? And so I just respect the fact that my board says we have one employee. So it's sole connector. You delegate, you give the authority, the accountability, but it's a singular person. You can't have two. Thoughts, comments, questions? Okay, let's look at the screen behind me. This is some more information on delegation to management. So the board should define and delegate, not react and ratify. That's an interesting contrast. Define and delegate, which is what PG does. You're not reacting to a situation, ratifying it as if you've given them that authority. But it's define the desired results, which you have at your ends. Define acceptable boundaries, your executive limitation. And these policies are defined by the board, not by staff or committees. So here's another really interesting thing. This is this idea of accountability versus empowerment. So this first one, traditional boards seek balance between accountability and empowerment. So here you go, you got accountability, you got empowerment, and they're kind of equal there if you're kind of looking at a diagram or a bar chart or whatever. Another model is with increased accountability comes lower empowerment. So we're going to hold you accountable, but we're not clear on what you can and cannot do. Well, that increases accountability, but it lessens empowerment. All right. The next way a board could choose to behave is give increased empowerment, but lack of accountability. Our commissioner's in charge, but he doesn't answer anybody, right? That doesn't work either, right? You see the problems with that? There are many boards who do this. Founders boards are guilty of this many times. I don't know who the founder of this association is. It's not you, is it?
No.
No. I know of ministries that have a founder and they have to put a board together as the corporation, and that founder is empowered, but there's no accountability. And that can be problematic. But here's policy governance. So obviously you'll see my bias here, but there is increased accountability, but increased empowerment. They're both equal. We've full empowerment, and here's the definition of that, of what your responsibilities are, and then we're holding you accountable. So that's the great thing about the delegation of management within the confines and within parameters of PG. So empowerment through policies. The board must develop a relationship with the head of school that provides necessary control and maximum empowerment. Both can now clearly understand their roles. That's the board and the commissioner. The board determines the level of control by the depth of its policies. Here's the control you're providing. It's your executive limitation. And the commissioner is empowered since he or she has total freedom within those board policies. So there you go. Accountability and empowerment. Now, we're going to get to how do you hold the commissioner accountable. But before we go there, questions, thoughts, comments, action steps concerning delegation of authority, accountability to your sole commissioner, your sole employee. Any thoughts, comments? Well, again, I got to just tell you, I said to somebody when we took our break, I think I said to you, I'm impressed with you guys. Multiple fronts, and this is another one of those. Good job. All right, so we're on number 9. Any reasonable interpretation? Whose turn is it?
I think it's me.
All right, Kim, you're up.
All right, in delegating decisions beyond the ones recorded in board policies, the board grants the delegatee the right to use any reasonable interpretation of those policies. In the case of ends and executive limitations, when a CEO exists, that delegate is the CEO. In the case of governance process and board management delegation, that delegatee is the CGO, except when the board has explicitly designated another board member or board committee.
Okay, so what did you just say?
Anything that is not specifically in our policies, we're giving Jimmy the right to, the authority, yes,
To do
decide, to
And
take action and interpret.
Okay. You're at the essence of it, but let's refine that a little bit. So what we're talking about is any policy you've given either yourself as a board. So this applies to you as CGO and this applies to you as CEO, all right? Any policy in this manual, you as the CEO, as the commissioner, have to be given the freedom to have any reasonable interpretation of the policy, okay? So, I'm gonna go back to an executive limitation here. I'm on 2.6, compensation and benefits. Those are words on paper, and y'all know communication, even in trying to be as clear as possible, can be interpreted one way or the other, or sometimes they're just gray areas. So, a PG board will give the grace to the CEO or the CGO to apply any reasonable interpretation to the stated policy. How do you do that? How do you guys do that? I'll tell you how we do it here. When I give a report to the board, we call them monitoring reports, which we're gonna talk about monitoring here in a minute. So I give a written report. I've already told you on the ends, we do an end every time we meet. I give a written report on those ends, and then there's a couple executive limitations I'm reporting on. When I give that report, I'm trying to say I'm in compliance or I'm not in compliance. I always want to be in compliance, and I work toward being in compliance. But before I even go there, here's the policy, and in my written report, I have the written policy, and then I give my interpretation of what that policy means and what compliance looks like for me with that in statement or that monitoring executive limitation. And so when I first started 9 years ago, that took a little while before, so the board I understood what the board wanted, and my interpretation was getting what the board was trying to say in their policy. Now I've been here 9 years, unless and until one of those limitations changes, and I've had a couple executive limitations change in my 9 years, then I come up with, I share with them my interpretation of that. So their response in a PG model is to accept any reasonable interpretation. Sometimes there's gonna be a dialogue among board members, is this a reasonable interpretation? What's the difference between reasonable and unreasonable? Y'all have to decide that, right? But Jimmy, I would encourage you in any monitoring report you give your interpretation in writing of what that policy says. I always say it like this: compliance with this executive limitation means, and I restate it. Sometimes it's really objective and it really doesn't need clarification. Like, I can't raise tuition more than 8% in any 1 year. Boom, that's pretty cut and dry, it's objective, right? Right? But there's one that says, I cannot pay employees something that doesn't reflect this, I'm sorry, I forget the language, I won't say it right, but you'll get the idea. Something that doesn't reflect what the going rate is for teachers or administrators, right? So there's some interpretation in that. All right, what data do I use? Do I use public school data? Do I use Christian school data?
Right.
So in my interpretation 9 years ago, I told them how I interpreted that. We had a dialogue about that. We clarified, and now that's what I go with. So my interpretation is, we're not comparing ourselves to public schools. We're comparing ourselves to Christian schools our size. And now I got to get data to demonstrate that we're paying our teachers what teachers get in Christian schools our size in the Southeast region of the United States. Okay? So they've accepted my interpretation, but a board's job is to accept any reasonable interpretation. All right, so let's look at this. Behind the board allows delegated authorities to use any reasonable interpretation of its policy. This is true for commissioner, CEO, and true for the CGO for your two parts, your two sections of the policy manual. So the commissioner will interpret the ends and the executive limitation policies. The board chair, the CGO, will interpret the governance process, board management delegation processes, and the interpretation includes how results and compliance will be demonstrated. So that's how it works. How do you guys do it? Any reasonable interpretation?
I think Jimmy does a good job. He takes maybe one or two limitations at a time and sends it to us to see what his interpretation of what he's done for that season.
Okay.
And we review it, and then we, at our board meeting, we will overall, and then we evaluate him on the scale, 1 to 100.
Okay.
Yeah, I think he does a good job of that. You've been around longer, but I think it's very well interpret it and what you're doing with each one.
Yeah, I mean, we all have a copy of our ends with Jimmy's interpretations of each one.
Okay.
So, and
Very good.
I honestly don't remember when we started if there was a whole lot of discussion around those. I mean, I feel like you did a really good job in the beginning of.
I think you guys did a
interpreting
good job of coming up with the ends though. They're very, like, they include almost everything. I think they're really well written. So I think that helps.
All right. Any thoughts, questions, comments? Any action items? Here? All right. Very good. Well, here we are. Dun, 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 number 10. I'll read this one. Number 10 is monitoring. The board monitors organizational performance solely through fair but systematic assessment of whether a reasonable interpretation of its ends policies is being achieved within the boundaries set by a reasonable interpretation of its executive limitations. If there is a CEO, this constitutes the CEO's evaluation. Okay, so there are 3 ways PG boards can monitor organizational performance. Written reports, we call them monitoring reports. It's another way. A third party. Southside Christian School hires a CPA auditing firm once a year to come in and monitor, make sure, I reported I'm in compliance. Now they have a third party come in every year. Finances, that's accepted, but it's normal, it's appropriate. But there is a third way a PG board can monitor. What would that be?
To have appointed,
Say again?
appoint, you're talking about monitor the financial conditions?
Or monitoring anything.
Anything.
Organizational effectiveness, executive limitations compliance, or ends achievement.
It would be within the board itself.
Exactly. You
Yeah.
could appoint, you could do an internal monitoring exercise.
Yeah.
CGO says, all right, Kim, I'm giving you and Louis authority to attend this
Clinic or
Tournament, maybe?
tournament, there you go,
Tournament,
thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And make sure you come back with a written report of if we've achieved which ends we achieved there, okay? And bring that back to, so it's authorized by the board, it's done internally, and it's a way you all can go, are we being effective?
I think my concern always is money, and that I squeak anytime I make decisions, whether it's my money, their money, or somebody else's
That's right.
money.
Good for you.
I mean, that's just the way I'm built. But I've always thought we need to have either our board or somebody related to volleyball, because our business is so different from the general business of companies and corporations. Is, you know, if I'm I use the crazy example, if I buy a tractor and stick it on the assets and purchase it, somebody knows that doesn't have to do with volleyball.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that, you know, we try to do it internally. So we're getting there, but
Okay. What is your annual budget, could I ask?
$1.5 million.
Okay. Yep. Do you do any sort of audit or audit review?
We've not had a paid auditor. We have
Okay.
a CPA for an accountant
Okay.
who does that. We used to do, and I want to get back to this. We used to have either it wasn't rotating. I think we hired you
I
sometime.
did it for a little while.
Yeah, we hired and paid for a board member, or I guess it could have been anybody, to review the financial reports. Now, the detailed financial reports, transactions, P&Ls, balance sheet, everything goes to all the board members. So if there's any questions can be asked, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
$1.5 million isn't chump change, right? And you all are responsible for stewardship of that $1.5 million. And so I would encourage you to think in terms of continue what you've done, maybe a little bit more. Some options are obviously an audit, but you can hire your CPA to do a review. That's a level below audit. It's a fraction of the cost,
Yeah.
but it accomplishes the same purpose, especially for $1.5 million.
Yeah.
If you were at 25 million, I'd say you probably just need
Do it
to
all.
bite the bullet and get a full-blown
Yeah.
audit every year.
Yeah.
But $1.5 million isn't small money, right?
Correct.
In a year, so, I appreciate what you're saying and what y'all are doing to do that. I would encourage you to maybe consider, maybe a review
Yeah.
by a CPA firm. It sounds like you have a relationship.
Yeah.
All right, so what are the 3 ways of monitoring? Written report from your commissioner, third party,
And internal.
Internal.
or
Internal.
internal. Yeah, very good. All right, so here's the textbook stuff. Performance must be rigorously monitored, but only against pre-established, predefined written policy. The commissioner now knows what he or she will be accountable for in the policies. Statement of the expectation must always precede assessment, so you have those expectations. The commissioner will be judged only within the board's stated rules and evaluated only against compliance to the board policies. So, how do you evaluate the performance of your commissioner? You evaluate it through his reaching the ends of your organization and his compliance to the executive limitations. So here's how that works in my world. In September, so after the school year's over and it's the first board meeting of the new school year, that's when our board has chosen to do my evaluation. So I give a report of the whole last year. It's a summary of all of my monitoring reports and ends reports from the whole prior year. And it's just a shortened version, kind of here's our ends, here's reporting compliance, and here's how we've achieved it, and here's the executive limitation of compliance there. And then I give a highlight of accomplishments of the school in that year. And then September comes, the board gets that summary assessment of my ends achievement and my executive limitation compliance. And I get to kind of present that to them in September, then they ask me to leave the room. And they go through my evaluation and discuss me when I'm not there. And I'm sitting here in my office like, man, it's 10 minutes, now it's 20 minutes, And it's a good process because then I get a text, the chair calls me back, and the board says, Dr. Barfield, we really appreciate, here's what we see, we affirm what you've reported to us all last year in the summary assessment. And then they talk about my salary and they renew my contract, right? But the point is my performance as a head of school is based solely on the accomplishment of the ends and my compliance to executive limitations. They don't use some other document that some other school uses and rate me in this and that. They don't survey the employees to find out how well they like me and what kind of decision making I do. My decision making is important, but it's defined in the executive limitations. And so, again, it's one of those things that helps me. It always encourages me. Someone asked me one time, what about we do a 360 evaluation? Is that PG? You know what 360 is? You're getting input from people above the commissioner, the board, people below. That's 360, right? So in a school world, that would be the board fills out a thing about how they perceive my leadership. The employees fill out something about, so that's 360, right? Well, the answer to that from a PG perspective is, how's that related to the ends or the executive limitations? Do the people who are doing the evaluation below or around even know what they are?
Right, they don't understand what you're
Of
trying.
course,
Yeah.
right? And can a teacher in a classroom adequately evaluate the head of school who's dealing with issues they never thought about, right? So it's just it's not appropriate, it's not effective. Now, I've done a 360 myself. I hired a firm, I said, I want to know how people perceive me in my leadership. So I did a 360 on myself. I gave the results to the board chair. You can do this what you want, but I've learned and grown from it, right? So, but my board is committed to doing my evaluation and my compensation pursuit of our ends, how well we achieve them, and my compliance to executive limitations. So, is there any parallel to what you guys do there?
Very much. Yeah.
Very good. Very good.
If you're, I don't know what kind of scale they use or how you do it. You getting feedback?
From the board?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if they rate you F on something, you get no why?
Okay, so the feedback I get is, do we believe you're in compliance or not with the executive limitations, and how well have we reached the end? So the feedback I get is, Dr. Barfield, next year we'd really like you to focus on end number 4 there.
Okay.
That's the feedback I get.
Okay.
Now, any board member can come to me as an individual and say, Sam, I heard you say this. Why don't you think about how this person was impacted by that? They're giving me advice and feedback,
Sure.
not as a board member, as an individual. And especially if it's a board member, like, what did you say again? I wanna know how did you receive that? I welcome that. So that gets down to that relationship thing too, right? So that feedback is always there. The board has another committee called the Head of School Care, Compensation, and Evaluation Committee. So they have a little text thread, and it's called Sam Care. And I sent them one the other morning. I said, hey, guys, there's 3 guys on this committee. I said, hey, man, I'm putting out 4 fires today. I would appreciate a little prayer support. All 3 of them responded. We're on it. Pray just now. Let me know how else we can support you. But 2 or 3 times a year, they meet with me. How's it going? How can we serve you better? How can we help you? How can we empower you better? Anything like that. What are the tough things you're dealing with this week? We can pray for you. And then they're the ones responsible for getting the data so that they're compensating me in the same kind of compensation that heads of schools and schools like this. And so it's so meaningful to me. That's a little bit bigger organization, a lot more employees, but if you're gonna have committees, the committees that we recommend are a governance and nominating committee, an audit committee, and a commissioner care and compensation committee. Those committees are designed to help the board do its work, right? So, not that you have to have those committees, you're not required to have committees. And a smaller board like this, you can make it possibly more nimble, and you can do that more effectively. But thoughts or comments or questions on that?
Good.
All right, just as resources, as we're landing this plane, and we're a little early, guys, there are resources out there, literature from these thought leaders, Don Carver and his wife Miriam, they partnered up. And then there's a couple other people who've really jumped in over the years, over the decades. Looking for, there she is, Caroline Oliver, has become another great thought leader in policy governance. There's an International Association of Policy Governance Leaders that you can tap into if you want. So just in closing, good governance is not about budget lines. It's
Go
not
back
about,
to the first one that Carver, the model. Okay, that's what I wanted. Okay.
I have that book. If you're interested, I can loan it to you. You can Google it and order it too. I mean, it's out there.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. This one right here was Carver's first book that came out in the early 90s. This is where policy governance was introduced and kind of fleshed out, and man, it just grabbed a hold and just went like wildfire across the country. He now is retired. He and his wife are retired, and the leadership of all of this has been now to the International Association of Policy Governance Leaders. It's a great organization. I belong to it. I'm certified by them. And but anyway, those are the resources that are available to you. So just kind of in conclusion, good governance is not about budget lines, personnel practices, the intricacies of programs or curriculum or tournaments or whatever would be applicable, or even group insurance purchases, right? It's not about that. Those are means to the ends, right? But good governance is about values, strategic leadership, vision, and reaching your ends. And you all have expressed your vision right here, and you've expressed your values right here, what you value, what you're trying to accomplish. So good governance is about achieving those ends. And I just love to say it's about obsessing about your ends, the ends of your association. So in conclusion, this, by the way, is a quote from Phil Graybill, who, after 21 years of teaching this, he at the end of first with a board somewhere went over this whole concept and they were really seriously looking at it. And so he said it was in the Midwest somewhere, so it was an old farmer. That's how he described it. This old farmer listened to him all day. He was on this board, and so the guy at the end, he didn't say anything all day, but then he says, "Yeah, I think I get it." And then this is what this old farmer understood policy governance. So this is his thing. Policy governance is a system of leadership that clarifies the roles of the board and the commissioner in such a way that both may experience the mutual joy of fulfilling a vision. Like, couldn't have said it better, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's the essence of it. Graybill Associates, obviously we're still working, even though Phil has retired, and in about a decade we'll probably rename the organization. We wanna keep Phil's name in it because it's so well known, and he's just built a clientele that's been great. But, here's some of the services that we provide, for administrators or commissioners or school boards, and then just some testimonials. So that's it. What thoughts, comments, questions do you have? Let's talk about this a little bit.
It's been good. You've done a good job in summarizing what we need.
Right. It's helped me a lot to really understand what Kim already understood. I mean,
Yeah.
I was learning from her as we go, but now I feel like, okay, I really truly understand what's
Yes.
going on.
Very good. Very good. My input again, just interacting with you this evening is I'm impressed with you guys and your organization and what you all have accomplished as a board. I'm impressed with your understanding of policy governance. I think you've got a couple board members that will get this training. I would really challenge you to think about a potential policy in the CGO section, what you said you guys are gonna do, to think about when a board member is elected, they either have some sort of session where they understand what PG is before they're elected, or if they're elected, before they serve, they get some sort of training. I'm not looking to drum up any more business for Graybill Associates, and it can be simplified, it literally can be a couple hours on Zoom or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But I would encourage you to think about that, just for continuity. And here's the experience that I told you I worked for ACSI, Association of Christian Schools, for 8 years, and I did this board training with Christian schools literally all over the country. And what I saw in that 8-year period was there were a couple times school heads would ask me to come back, did the training, the board got going on PG and governing effectively, then they had some elections or some person moved away, and half their board now hasn't been trained. They don't really understand PG. I come back 5 years later, it's like, what happened to you guys? Like you were tracking, you were boom, boom, hitting all these cylinders. But that piece of just requiring that orientation and training for new board members as they come in is so key to sustaining a long-term sustainability of performing high with PG. So just my recommendation to y'all to consider. I leave that with you, Mrs. CGO.
I took
Thank
them
you
notes.
very much.
Yeah,
You've
thank
done
you for your
Done a
time.
wonderful
Thank you.
job.
Pleasure.
Yeah. Could we have this for 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes?
This room?
Yeah. And I don't
Absolutely.
guess it's not a way for me to hook to that, is there? Is that wireless?
It is wireless, but it's wireless for Mac,
For your sit, yeah, don't worry about it.
Not for Apple.
Maybe I can get them to come over here and look over my shoulder just for a minute. And then-
is there an HDMI plug-in? Because I can plug you in HDMI. Do you
Well,
think?
I don't
I have a
think
cable.
I've
You have
got the C drive, I don't think I've got I think I left it at the.
What
Don't
I'm
worry
talking
about
about
it, they
is
can
like-
do this, I mean, it's just a couple of minutes.
Okay.
They can,
You want me to leave?
no, you can
Oh,
sit here
okay.
if you want to, you're welcome to. Can you guys come behind me just a minute?
Yep.
And let me show you, let me see if I can expand this a little bit. So I've got the budget 85%, maybe 90%, and this is the new, coming from QuickBooks, the new budget. It shows actual budget over budget. And this is running from September to current. So it gives you actual, for example, championship income is, championship income is tournament income, which is right here. So we've collected 92% of what I think will come in based on what's registered. So that gives you an idea. Most of the stuff is not showing because we don't have the expenses yet. But this is what it will show. For example, revenue to date's $750,000, the budget 1.6, and then it goes through expenses, board expenses, staff expenses, and actually Angela had asked, I put the name out there. I can put the name and I can change it if somebody changes. So it tells them what it is. But the way I'm going to report this actually is on a spreadsheet that looks like this. So I'll actually be able to put comments out here explaining it in more detail. It's the same report except with comments like that. And like I said, I'm about 85 or 90%. I'm waiting on AES to get back to me, Sports Engine to get back to me to track down some specific income and expenses and, also, membership stuff, so. And I've gotta get with, Shelley on just a couple of things that's in a bucket that I've gotta take out and stick in another bucket. But it's 85 or 90%, and I'm hoping that's kind of what you're looking for. Questions?
I want to really quick. The 13,000. I put 22,000 for budget for referees.
Yeah.
It went down to 13,000 for evaluators. So I want you to understand that, and I talked to Jimmy. The evaluators, you get a head referee that is paid by the host. The head referee is $300. When you host in 3 or 4 different locations, okay, what I try to do, I try to put obviously the evaluator is gonna evaluate somebody in a different location, but that evaluator can be evaluator and can also be a head referee. The only downside to that is a head referee is gonna be in that facility from the beginning until the end. Evaluator is gonna do the evaluations, probably like 4 or 6 per day, and then 5, 6, 7 o'clock, that evaluator is gonna leave that facility. So that's the main difference. Okay, so once we have tournaments, like we have like 3 or 4 different locations. This coming up weekend, we have one in Rocky, and I know it's not you guys. We got one in Rock Hill, then I got facilities in 2 facilities in Columbia. 12 years old. I mean, 12 are easy. No, they're not. Because number one, you all know that when we got 12, I'm not gonna send the most experienced. I mean, let's be honest.
Right.
You're not gonna get the most
Right.
experienced referee. So that's why we send evaluators. So I want you to know that, I'm working within that 13,000. I don't think I'm gonna go over, but if I go over just a little bit, it's not gonna be
Right.
just a little bit, it's because of that. And then we have the championships in Spartanburg and Rock Hill, right? One weekend is in
Yeah, the
Spartanburg.
first
and
weekend,
weekend.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the main change.
Well, all the evaluating you're doing is making a difference, so.
And I know Jimmy have and Rock Hill, you have 2 evaluators and 1 head official. I mean, it helped that head official because sometimes they got issues with the course where you still got the 2 evaluators down on the 15,
Correct.
16 course and they can't help out as well.
Right, right,
That's, I mean, you don't know what you got until they're not there, that's
Right.
the main.
that's true.
Yeah.
Anyway, once I get through with this, let's have a Zoom meeting and I'll cover it in detail. I'll send it out first, you can look at it. and
We'll
then
put it together with those couple other things we gotta do. We can have like the other, you said
Yeah.
like 3 action items, we can do that the same meeting.
Okay.